Good morning, Wendell. Good morning, all. Good morning, Mr. President.
Morning.
Welcome to the special edition of the Political Show. It is where our leaders answer the hard questions about their policies, their plans for this country, and other burning issues. Mr. President, our warmest welcome to you, sir, to our studio here at Kaieteur, England.
Good to hear it,
I was told by a little birdie that you were also an old QC boy, a couple of years ahead
I'm a
of me.
former QC boy, not an old QC boy.
Well, sometimes it depends how we look at it. We're porch. I was telling James Bond a few weeks back when he was here that the last time you and I sat, I was heading to your office at the Ministry of the Presidency, and my car ran into another car, and I called Lloyd and I said, I can't make it. I said, no, we're going to wait on you. And I remembered, I said, that's a story when I get a little older that I'm going to tell my little kids or my grandkids, and they say, I had a president waiting. So let's get down to the people's business, Mr. President. You're headed in what is supposed to be early elections, triggered by a no confidence motion that was being passed not only by the Parliament but by three courts. Sir, after almost 5 years, what have you and the coalition government done that would compel voters to return you and your partners to government?
We've done a lot for the people. We've improved the quality of life, that is most important for the majority of people, in every imaginable sphere. People were concerned about the fact that the previous administration hadn't held local government elections for nearly 2 decades. We had local government elections twice. The first time within 10 months of getting into office in 2016. We had local government elections again last year. And this was a great fillip for people at the lower levels of the administrative stratum, in the neighborhoods and the municipalities. We created 4 towns at Bartica, Mabaruma, Madia, and Letham. And if you see the development taking place in those towns, you understand that the people in those regions, this is the first time that the entire hinterland has been administered by these capital towns. And the life is improving. We're delivering public services to the people in those towns and in those regions. We had a region like Rupununi, for example, which is bigger than Costa Rica, being administered by a village. Letem was basically the Ireng Sawariwau NDC. So life is getting better. Passport offices are being installed in these communities. Education and other public services are improving. Water supplies. I tell a story the other day about the East Bank Babis. There's a village called Plektanka, and they got running water. The man said, this is the happiest day of my life, you can have a shower. So there are many areas in this country where the delivery of public services has improved. And in the schools, we have provided at present about 30 buses to take children to school. We've provided a dozen boats in the rivers. We provided 4,000 bicycles. So at the grassroots level, at the level of the ordinary Guyanese, they know that the quality of life has improved, and they look forward to returning us to office. Even for pensioners, when I went into the 12th Parliament in 2012, the 10th Parliament, sorry, in 2012, pensions were getting about $7,500. They're getting over $20,000 now. I get thank you cards from pensioners because of the increase in pensions. A public servant who was getting the basic minimum wage of about $42,000 now getting $64,000. So quality of life is improving. People have more money in their pockets, and they like what they see in the coalition government over the last 4 years and 4 months.
Have you been able, sir, to do an analysis to see, you were talking about the raise in pension, but correspondingly, when it comes to the cost of living, to see whether it is even out or what? Because at the end of the day, the money in your pocket is what counts. Have you been able to do an analysis to see?
There has been analysis, and the rate of growth of the economy and the rate of inflation in no means diminish the impact of the high increase. When we talk about increase in wages, it ranges about 40 or 50% in some cases. And this shows that the greatest benefit is to the greatest number of people, the ordinary people.
I'm gonna ask you, sir, do you regret taking this job? I'm asking you this as a term has been cut short by a no confidence motion. The effect of it is that we're still running into next year, but you've battled cancer successfully. We are learning now, and congrats on that, and to your family. And now the legal hurdle since December the 21st. I'm asking you, do you regret taking this job?
I have no regrets. The greatest honor any citizen could have is to be freely and democratically elected as president. And I am honored to have been so elected. I'm happy at having a team in my own party, the People's National Congress, in my partnership, APNU, which is a grouping of 5 parties, and to be in coalition with the AFC. And I have great confidence, and the people have confidence in me, in the party, in the partnership, and the coalition. That's why, we won 207,000 votes in 2015. I'm very confident in moving forward. I have no regrets. I believe the people share that confidence, and I expect that on March 2nd, I have an even larger majority. But you must look at where I come from. I grew up in all 3 counties, what used to be counties then before the regional structure was introduced. I grew up at Essequibo at Bartica, then I went to the Quarantine, then I came to Georgetown. And in moving about, I learned a lot about the people who live in those various regions. Quarantine was largely Indian. Bartica was called the gateway to the hinterland, and it was mixed population, African, Indian, Chinese, Portuguese, and Amerindian. And Georgetown, when I came here in the early 1950s, I was able to live in an integrated community. So I brought to my job as president experiences growing up in different parts of the country. After that, I went into the army. Well, I did a stint in journalism. I was sub-editor of the Graphic, which used to be where the Chronicle is now in Lama Avenue. And then I went into the army. So I brought a lot of experience from the army, serving for 29 years and becoming a commander. I was in business for a while as a business person. I ran a magazine for about 15 years. And I was an academic. I lectured at UG and I lectured at the National Defense University. And I'm now a politician. So I bring the experience of 4 professions to the job. So apart from being honored and happy, I feel very competent that I can fulfill the wishes of the Guyanese people.
Well, that's very good. I don't know how somebody could run a magazine for 15 years and make money in this country. It's a difficult thing.
Let me tell you how.
The Cummings-Borg Accord, we understand that you're having talks with the AFC or coalition partner at the moment. You had indicated, I think with Gordon Mosley recently, that look, we might have some issues based on what would have been signed in 2015, that it might have some conflicts with the Constitution. I understand also that you've met with the Comrade Ramzatan and his other members of his party yesterday. What has been the outcome of that, and what are the sticking points? And do you see yourself, the APNU, going back with the AFC in the coming elections?
First of all, yes. The coalition is, what you can say, it is greater than the sum of its parts. It's not just 6 parties. We have a political mechanism which has given the people of Guyana hope that we are getting away from one-party politics, we're getting away from winner takes all. And people like what they see. Here you have representatives of 6 parties which bring various constituencies into the coalition. It is not one political party hoping to claim power. They know that the representatives will speak up for them. Yes, we have had negotiations with the Alliance for Change. The APNU itself was established in 2011. This is 8 years ago, when we were proceeding into the elections. So those 5 parties have been together ever since. The coalition with the AFC only was established in 2015, on, as you know, Valentine's Day. It was bound by an accord. The accord has expired, and we have asked for the accord to be renegotiated. We have embarked on a four-stage process. One is to agree on a set of core principles. That has been done. You can tick that off. Second, we are examining the review of the accord itself. And now that we've agreed on the core principles, we want to embed those principles in the accord. Third, we will move on to the manifesto. And then fourth, we'll launch our campaign. We hope that all of this could be accomplished as early as possible. I did meet Mr. Ramjatan yesterday, the last day of October, and there were questions about the prime ministership, and I was able to assuage his fears that the coalition as a whole will address those issues. He has made certain proposals. I have given him certain undertaking, and it is expected within another couple of days. Our partners, which have to examine those proposals, will come to some conclusions. But apart from that, there are other issues about how the coalition would be managed. As you know, that in 4 years and 4 months, you know, there were some issues, and I am very confident that having worked together, Mr. Nagamutu has been my prime minister. He's been a very strong support. Mr. Ramjatan and Mr. Granger and Mr. Alikok were 3 other vice presidents. I've had 4 vice presidents. And we worked well together as a cabinet. And I'm very confident that whatever problems might arise in the process of negotiation, we'll be able to overcome. We look forward to launching the campaign after those 4 steps have been completed.
Have you contemplated, sir, whether the APNU could run on its own, and what are likely its prospects in an election in 2020?
Even if it were possible, it's not desirable. I believe in the Big Benab. I want to see parties bringing different constituencies into the coalition. And even if APNU were capable of going on its own, it is desirable to have the Guyana Action Party, which is largely based in the Amerindian community. It is desirable to base the Justice for All Party, the Working People's Alliance. Every Guyanese know the relationship between the WPA and the PNC, but we're all able to bring them in one Benab, the Big Benab. So even if there were people in APNU who wanted to go alone, or the people in the PNC who wanted to go alone, I don't think at this stage of Guyanese history we should ignore the benefits of coalition government. People like what happened. And I can tell you, Cabinet is a place where all parties bring their concerns for discussion. And in my government, every single coalition partner is represented. I don't differentiate. I mean, Justice for All is in Parliament, the National Front Alliance in Parliament, Working People's Alliance in Parliament. So it is a truly innovative and consultative invention in Guyanese politics. And my prediction would be that this is the form of politics the people of Guyana prefer.
Well, the scenario has changed somewhat from 2015. In 2015, when you went, the FC was there, and they were able to grab some votes somewhere, these Blackbush Polar, some areas where traditionally you would not have seen the opposition getting into. However, since then things have changed. We had 4 estates that were closed, but 6,000-7,000, predominantly the Indo-Guyanese, who were without a job and who would have moved on to other things. Where are these votes going to come from? The ones that is going to propel you into the presidency again?
The population of Guyana is not only confined to the sugar estates. We regret very much having to sever any workers, but it's a wide population in the hinterland communities, in the urban areas, in the rural areas. And it is possible, I'm not making an ethnic analysis here, it is possible that many of the people who did not vote for us in the last election in 2015 won't vote for us again. But we had a margin, we got 207,000 votes, and I'm very confident that because of our record over the last 4 years, we will increase our votes. People have gotten greater confidence, and it is not possible to judge the AFC or any single party on the performance which occurred, or which they had made, a few years ago. Things have changed. Our people have been on the ground. There have been outreaches. They've seen the benefits of coalition government, and I am confident that on the ground, people are going to support the coalition parties, and that is why it's important for us to conclude the negotiations with AFC quickly, so that the people can see that we are still united. We're going forward together.
I thank you for that, Mr. President. There's a big talk right now about oil. Hess Company, one of the partners with Exxon in that Stabroek block, has made it very clear that this is one of the best things that has happened for oil this year. We have one of the biggest discoveries that's paralleled by what is happening with Russia. Our cost of production also is the lowest in the world, according to Hess. I'm going to ask you again, such a background. Do you believe that we could do a little more to get a better deal with oil against what we have right now?
We are doing more, and we are getting better. The Department of Energy was established only on 1st of August last year, 2018. And when we got into government, nobody knew the size of oil. There was no apparatus, there was no mechanism, there was no ministry. It was tagged on to the Ministry of Natural Resources under Robert Prasad, and we know what happened there. And we inherited a structure, and we tried to make that structure work. Structure cannot work. It was inadequate, and we discovered this, and we have put in place the department. We're now building our human resource capacity. We have to put the legislative framework in place. We have to put the administrative framework in place. We have to put an organizational framework in place. And we are doing these things. We can do more, and we are moving faster. We got a tremendous amount of assistance from the Inter-American Development Bank. But the human resource problem, there were just no people with that level of training to run a huge industry like the oil industry. Let me tell you something. A few years ago, I went up to Matthews Ridge. A company was interested in restarting manganese production.
Reunion.
Whatever, Reunion. Sometimes I don't like to call company names. But the company was planning to restart manganese production. The signs are very hopeful. And I was introduced to the technical staff there. Somebody from Sri Lanka, somebody from Ghana, somebody from Canada, somebody from Trinidad. No Guyanese people, even to restart manganese. So we have to build human capacity, and that is responsible for the focus I've been paying on education, particularly scientific and technological education, over the last few months. Almost every address I've given is about technical education, scientific education. But in order to make that industry work, we need technically and scientifically qualified people. Let me tell you another story. This is not a day for anecdotes. But as you know, as long as I'm able, I go over to SVN on the West Coast, Swami Akarananda's school. And the student who was the best student 2 years ago, I think her name is Victoria Najir. Okay, I'm corrected by Latvan saying he makes a note of these things. But she has now been gobbled up by, well, gobbled up is a bad word, she has now been recruited by ExxonMobil. And when I asked for her, because I quoted part of my recent address, and they said she's in Houston, Texas. So it means that the message about scientific and technical education is catching on, and even school leavers from secondary school are now thinking about, what do you want to do? I want to be a petroleum engineer. So in years to come, Guyana will be doing much better, but 20 years ago, nobody's thinking of becoming a petroleum engineer because we had no petroleum industry.
Are we paying attention to what has happened to other countries, oil countries that is? We have next door Venezuela and Trinidad. I think recently I was listening to a speech by Keith Rowley, the PM of Trinidad, and he says, we're not willing, we've made some mistakes, so we're not willing to take the crumbs off the table. And they're scrambling because they've gone into a negative mode in terms of growth. Are you paying as chief guard of the gatekeepers? Are you paying attention to these best practices, the bad examples around the world to say, look, we're not going to go this way, that we want to spend our money in a certain way? What are you doing as the leader of this country? What assurance could you give to the people?
But lessons abound, there are always the voices of gloom and doom, warning about what has happened to one country or the other. We are in a unique situation in that not a single drop of oil has been commercially produced as yet. Although we started off a bit slowly in 2015, as I said, nobody estimated or understood the size of the petroleum find. We have now put in place a Department of Energy. We are now recruiting best personnel. We are going to get the best advice from the Commonwealth and from the banks and people who have experience. And we will make sure that we have a first-class petroleum industry, which is efficiently and honestly administered. So we are aware of what has happened in other countries. We've also started to take steps. There's a sovereign wealth fund, what is called a Natural Resources Fund, to make sure that the money is not squandered. It will be controlled by legally enforceable apparatus. It's already gone to the National Assembly. We'll ensure that the policy that we have outlined for what I call the decade of development from 2020 to 2029 puts the profits or the revenues from petroleum in certain directions. We are concerned about education, that is training this educated elite to run these major industries, and of course, eliminating illiteracy. We are also concerned about eliminating or eradicating poverty. There are a lot of poor people in this country, and we would like to bring more of those poor people into the economy. We would like to make sure that the people who live west of the Essequibo are not deprived of natural resources. We'd like to protect our environment to make sure that our air quality or water quality wouldn't be damaged. So we have a clear plan, a clear direction in which we're going over that 10-year period between 2020 and 2029. So we know what we're doing. Our eyes are wide open. We're getting the best advice. And I can assure the Guyanese people that they are going to be inheriting a country, not only the biggest country in the Caribbean, not only the most blessed and most beautiful country in the Caribbean, but one that gives them a high quality of life. And that is one area that I think the coalition has mastered over the last 4 years, improving the people's quality of life. We're not in the business of stuffing money into rich people's pockets. We're in the business of making sure all Guyanese will have a good quality of life.
I want to ask you, sir, I know you've been very proud of your buses, breakfast, and other programs that you have, and you've been talking about it. I've listened to so many speeches from you. But what about our vulnerables, the pensioners, the kids that live in some hinterland areas? What are some of the programs that you've introduced over the last couple of years and that you have planned for the vulnerables within society? Like we look at the Palms, I think one of your ministers was by the that place on Carmichael Street yesterday, Ptolemy Reed, and there are plans for that. So I want to ask you, sir, what exactly or how are you planning to deal with the oil money to deal with the vulnerables?
There are many programs which are already in place, which we will continue and enlarge. As far as vulnerable old folks are concerned, we have increased pensions up to over $20,000 a month, which is a major increase from previous years. We've increased social protection, that is vulnerable people who apply for social protection who qualify. For younger persons, we reintroduced the Youth Corps, and we are in the process of making Kurukuru a youth campus. We have extended the HEYS program for the hinterland youth, where people are given grants to start up business. We have implemented the SLED program, the Sustained Livelihood Entrepreneurial Development Program. A lot of young people benefit from that program. We've had LEN at Linden, the Linden Enterprise Network. And there are several other programs which help vulnerable citizens. But we don't want to create a nation of people living on handouts. We want to create a nation of independent employees, or independent business persons themselves. So I virtually emptied the New Opportunity Corps of girls. I've gotten them back home, and I'm helping them to enter into businesses. And young people at Kurukuru, this is an area that I believe the press should take more interest in, see the type of work young people are doing. And when they leave that corps, that Guyana Youth Corps, they should be able to go into business and become independent citizens. So there are many programs for hinterland, for disadvantaged young people, and for young girls and boys who are willing to work. I've been criticized for trying to empty the jails of young people. And that's one of the reasons why we've moved to ensure that possession of small amounts of marijuana should no longer be, the cause of imprisonment. So we know that there are many young people who need jobs, and these are some of the measures we're taking to ensure young people get jobs. But the most important is to keep them in school. And when you mention the buses, boats, it's not a sideshow. This is an important part of our plan for ensuring children get to school. It is not a sideshow, it is not an election gimmick. If children do not go to school, they will not be able to complete their education, and they're likely to become dropouts. Since the program started, dropouts have been reduced. Every major river in Guyana now has at least one boat. We have 30 buses on the roads, taking children to school free, pumping money back into their homes, sometimes $30,000, sometimes $28,000, $25,000. These policies have arisen out of my relationship with ordinary people in the riverine areas, in the communities. People would tell me their daughters are not going to school because they can't afford the taxi fare or the minibus fare, or they can't afford the boat fare, in the case like the Pomeroon, which has no road, the Pomeroon River. And they were the ones who inspired me to embark on this program. And I think it's a good program. It gets children to school, and it has increased attendance and reduced dropouts.
So you think this, the programs that you've introduced, Mr. President, it has given you, they've given you the support that's one of the biggest supports that you're going to have coming into 2020, the elections?
This is not, I don't do things to win elections. I do things to make the people happy and to give them a good quality of life. If they vote for me, well, that's good. Of course, I want them to vote for me. But I don't do things only to get it to vote for me. I do. When I went into the Pomeroon and gave them that vote, it was to make sure children go to school. When I had 2 local government elections, it's not because, of course I wanted to win. Who doesn't want to win local government elections? But it's because it's the democratic entitlement. The democratic entitlement of people to elect their own municipalities and their own neighborhood democratic councils. Yes, you can say that, APNU didn't do well, but the point is Guyana did well because we have proven our democratic credentials, and we have allowed the people to select the neighborhoods and the municipalities that they want to govern them. And I will continue to do that.
You did mention marijuana. Is there any thoughts or contemplation at this point in time to decriminalize marijuana under your administration?
We have removed the custodial sentences for persons possessing small amounts of marijuana. At this point in time, I would say Cabinet is open to examining presentations about the use of marijuana, and we don't want to introduce something which could be harmful to young people. There is evidence that young persons using certain types of narcotics might become addicted, or they might be attracted to using other types of addictive narcotics. And in Guyana, we don't want to have situations in which the use of any narcotic is uncontrolled, and that people might be stuffing chemicals and other undesirable substances into the narcotics. We have to be very careful. We are very protective of our young people, and we are not interested in greater addiction. We realize that a lot of persons have been put into jail because of the possession of marijuana, or particularly ganja, and we have moved to remove the custodial sentences. But we don't want to encourage the unrestricted industrial scale cultivation of marijuana, it will get into our school and it will be very disruptive socially, as it has proven to be already. We don't have the safeguards that might be present in the Netherlands or Canada or some other jurisdiction. But it is something that the cabinet is examining. We will get the best advice, medical advice. We have to concern ourselves with the medical health of our young people.
This morning, Stabrook, and I know before 2015, the coalition and opposition would have railed against, and you've spoken about it. We had our breakfast at the Baridi tent. So you spoke about the freedom of the press, and we have this morning Stabrook News speaking about the withholding of ads. And we have been standing with Stabrook News, and I know that is not something that you would back. Have you taken note of that, and where do you stand with the withholding of ads from a newspaper or media house?
We have considered it. There is what I would call a commercial dispute about it. There must be fairness. We believe that the advertisements should be directed to the media houses based on their willingness to disseminate news fairly. Only in this morning's paper, there's a letter to the editor. It concerns the celebration of Queen's College's 180th anniversary. It is my considered opinion that Queen's College, through its laboratories, through its graduates, not least of all the fact that it produced 4 presidents, has contributed immensely to the education and the, if you want to call it, the intelligentsia of Guyana. And Stabrook News didn't feel fit to carry an article about it. And there was a complaint about that. Now, there's a Latin expression, called suppressio veri, suggestio falsi, which means that if you suppress the truth, you suggest the false. And by not covering a major national event, it's depriving the people of Guyana the right to know. And we need to have journalists, we need to have media houses which are fair and balanced. And I do not believe that it is the right of any editor or any media house to deliberately not report on public events out of bias. And we have to be careful about that. But coming back to your question, I do not support the withholding of advertisements. I have not investigated the matter, but once the commercial dispute is settled, it will return to normal. But papers must be guaranteed, media houses, because now we're not only dealing with the 4 urban-based newspapers, we're dealing with other means of delivery of news. They must all be given a fair access to the advertisements of the state. It's a state resource. It's not a private resource for one company or the other company. And we have now extended the media reach. We now have several broadcasting stations in Lethem, Madia, Mabaruma, Bartica, Oriala, and elsewhere. And we have to ensure that all of the media houses are treated equally because they provide the people with accurate information. I don't believe in denying the public the right to know, and I don't believe editors should give themselves that power not to tell people about important national events. And
you have evidence to that sort that they would have instructed?
I have evidence that Kaieteur that Stabrook News did not cover the event on Tuesday, and there is a note by the editor explaining why he didn't cover it. And there are other incidents. This is not the first time Stabrook News has failed to cover important national events involving the President of the Republic of Guyana. It is habitual.
Leading up to the 2015 elections, the coalition took a very firm stance on corruption. As a matter of fact, there were many projects, many investments, by-channeling the airport and otherwise. I was looking at Gordon Mosley interview, and you indicated, you showed another side of David Granger, the president of Guyana, which you said contrary to what other people are saying, I'm very much in charge. I probably would not be using the big stick method, but I've been calling my permanent secretaries, I've been calling my ministers to account for what they're doing every single month and every single week. I want to ask you, sir, how is being in charge of the administration formally? How is your fight against corruption going? Because we would have taken note, of course, of Soko and the lack of success when it comes to conviction. Do you believe that you've done enough, or where did we err, or where did the system fall down?
This is a loaded question, Leonard, if I can say so. You have to understand where we started in 2015. The fact that the previous administration was very tolerant to some abuses. We didn't inherit, we didn't, invent, some of the crises. The most important problem that we faced is security sector reform. You cannot investigate these crimes or these allegations if there are elements in the law enforcement forces themselves which have been collaborating with the very criminals. If files are disappearing, and if because of other forms of bias, the police are not efficient, and don't forget the SOCU is a branch of the police force, it's not an independent agency. It is a branch of the police force entirely under the commissioner, entirely under the Ministry of Public Security. And we have to conduct these investigations with the people who are available. As the American politician said, you go to war with the troops you have, not with you go to war with the army you have, not with the army you want. And we inherited a police force which has got to be reformed. And that process of reform is not complete. It is now taking place, and I regret that we have made attempts to bring people to justice, but the evidence has not been sufficient to have convictions. We have embarked on a process of investigating some of the atrocities, and Kaieteur News earned our sympathy because many of the staff members of Kaieteur News were killed during that horrible massacre. But many of the witnesses have been themselves eliminated, have been themselves killed. So we need to have a police force which is capable, more able to get the evidence and bring these cases to court so that people can be prosecuted. But no criminal is so stupid as to leave tracks or trails of the evidence of the misdeeds. And I've been very disappointed that we weren't able to bring prosecution not only in matters of corruption, but in also matters of crime, of murder, and many of those cases. I mean, the case of Kaieteur, the relatives approached me. I think one even attempted to sue the previous government because they failed to protect Mr. Kaieteur, cabinet minister. And we have not been able to proceed because the witnesses themselves were eliminated. A police commissioner publicly stated, we cannot proceed in this case because all of the witnesses have been killed. Killed by whom? So these are some of the problems we face, and we have not been able to go as far and as fast as we would like.
The opposition, sir, has been saying over time there's corruption within your administration. You would have taken note of this. Have you found any corruption within your administration, and have you taken any actions as such?
I have not found corruption. If there is any report of perhaps neglect, I have taken action. I've made some changes, but I have not found corruption which is uninvestigated. I've conducted, as you know, many commissions of inquiry, and where people are culpable, and the commissions always ask for to ascertain blameworthiness. For example, right now Dr. Kaieteur is conducting an inquiry into the piracy off the coast of Suriname. It will be very difficult to find the culprits who was responsible, but once we find the culprits, we will take action. But in many of those cases, people have covered up their crimes, and if you have corrupt officers in the law enforcement agencies, revenue or police or elsewhere, they will cover up the accomplices in crime. It is a wide problem, and we have to start by reforming the police force to ensure that there's better investigation, better prosecution, which will lead to incarceration. And eventually to removal or diminishing the crime that we saw during the Troubles when so many people died.
We have half of the country, Mr. President, almost half of the country with votes one way and the other half vote the other way. And I'm talking, there has been a theory that we voted along racial lines. I'm not sure whether you would have taken note of that. We have the PPP, the PNC, now you have APNO and the AFC. Have you ever contemplated, as you're in the driver's seat now, whether there could be something, shared governance, not a model, other than the ones where we put people in commissions and said they're representatives? Have you probably considered, let's say, put a few ministers from the opposition within the government, within the cabinet? I'm asking you because I've asked other leaders, other ministers sitting here, and nobody seems to have an answer to the problems that we have.
I have the answer.
What's the answer, sir?
The coalition is the big benab. The coalition is bringing parties with their constituents. Even if those constituents are ethnically defined or geographically defined, bring them into the big benab, bring them into the coalition. Because of my age and experience, I am aware that ethnic division is a serious problem, which translates into political voting patterns. If you go to the State House on Diwali night, you will see Hindus celebrating Diwali in State House. If you go there, Pagwa, you'll see Hindus celebrating Pagwa. If you go at Eid, you see Muslims celebrating in State House. So I am a president who is inclusionary. I created a minister of social cohesion to help to solve this very problem. So the coalition itself is a mechanism that allows for parties to bring their constituents in. And the Ministry of Social Cohesion is working at the political organization community level to bring non-governmental organizations, religious organizations into the coalition. Not only ethnic, there was also a gender disparity. 10 of my ministers are women. And we have probably the most gender balanced government in the history of the country. Even with national awards, last year, about 50% of the awardees for the first time in history were women. So we're bringing the genders together. Look, in my own party, my general secretary is a woman, my chairman is a woman. So I've been trying to bring about gender balance, I've been trying to bring about ethnic balance, I've been trying through the Ministry of the Department of Social Cohesion to remove some of the obstacles to ethnic collaboration and cohesion. And the political system itself, I feel will eventually be modified. You can't tell people how to vote. If you want to vote for the uncle or the niece or the nephew, well, it may eventually follow an ethnic pattern. But that is not the objective. The objective is to make sure the interests of all groups are met, and the coalition has been able to do that. And you asked me a very difficult question about bringing people from other parties into the government itself. Let us try it. When I entered office, I did offer to enter into talks, meaningful talks, with the opposition. And because of my duties, I could not be involved in day-to-day talks, and I nominated the Prime Minister to lead the talks, and that offer was rejected. That some people were unwilling to meet the Prime Minister, who is my nominee, to lead those inter-party talks. I cannot lead everything. I have to depend on advice, and it stumbled at the first hurdle. Other people, it takes two to tango. Other people must be willing to come forward and say, yes, I would like them to share. We don't know everything. If they feel they can bring constituencies into the government, let us try it. Right now, I have a big benab. If people want to collaborate with APNU and AFC, if people want to share a common agenda, they're willing to come in. And it started to happen. Other people are calling us, and we would welcome them in the benab.
You were always very passionate about our borders, security at our borders, and I know coming into 2015, with what was happening with Venezuela, we decided to go to the International Court of Justice. What is happening there, and how is your foreign policy working at the moment?
Well, we had some disappointment with the loss of Minister Granger, who was making a lot of headway in this issue. We have had to work at various levels. It is not just the level of the court. We have had to work with our friends in the Commonwealth and in the Caribbean, in the non-aligned movement, in the Organization of American States, to get their support for our claim. Most Guyanese living today were born under the shadow of this Venezuelan claim. And the beginning of last year, for the first time, we saw the light. The Secretary General of the United Nations, Mr. Guterres, was able to direct, because he is the only person in the world who can give such an order, to direct that the matter be taken to the court. And it has been taken to the court, and we're very confident that the court will rule in our favor. So the next generation of Guyanese will be able to grow up outside of the threat of Venezuelan sanctions or provocation. And we've had some very difficult times with Venezuela, and I would like the next generation to live in peace. I would say that it is going well, and I very much regret the situation in Guyana, in Venezuela at present. As you know, it has pushed about 10,000 migrants across the border, and we can't afford that. And I hope that stability returns to Venezuela, and those people return home, and that we have peaceful relations with our neighbors, with all three neighbors, Brazil, Venezuela, and Suriname. So we are working continuously. We are not arrogant. We have been the victims of aggressive behavior over the last 53 years, and we hope that future generations will not have to undergo what we underwent. You know.
Are you worried about the capacity to deal with the influx of foreigners, foreign workers, the Venezuelans, the Cubans, the Haitians, everybody who's heading to these shores? Do we have the capacity to deal with it in terms of resources, manpower, everything? Are you worried? 10,000 Venezuelans,
yes,
etc.
We don't have the capacity to feed them. We have, put in place, even before the crisis reached this point, we put in place a minister of citizenship. Many people, were baffled. They say, why do we need a minister of citizenship? But when you look at what has happened in Eastern Europe, in Hungary, in Germany, and Greece, people now realize that migration is one of the biggest international problems. Look what happened in Britain, with the massacre of those migrants. We have put our migration on a sound footing. I am not worried. We had the foresight to establish a Ministry of Citizenship. And in terms of our capacity, well, honestly, Guyana would not like to have to bear the burden of destitute migrants, and we have to move quickly to ensure that they could be self-sufficient. We welcome them as long as they can feed themselves and as long as they obey our laws. And we hope that once the crisis in that country is over, they will go back home. We ourselves, as you know, for many years have been migrants. So we have large pools of Guyanese. There are people with what I would call Guyanese names living in eastern Venezuela who migrated there. They don't speak English or even Creolese, but there are a lot of Guyanese in Suriname, and there are a lot of Guyanese in Brazil who've gone across the borders over decades. And we too have been beneficiary of hospitality of those neighboring states, and we have treated Venezuelans very hospitably. In terms of capacity, we have gotten some help from the international migration organization, but we need to discourage mendicancy or destitution and ensure that anybody coming into the country, could sustain himself and his family. Now, because of the level of technological development I mentioned earlier in this program, we need to encourage migration of technically qualified people to help us in our petroleum industry and to help us to invest in manufacturing. I see a great future for manufacturing, and many of our businessmen don't seem to be inclined to go into manufacturing. And if persons are prepared to go into gold jewelry, if they're prepared to come into the country to manufacture furniture, bring new ideas, new technologies, they'll be welcome. Every country in the world relies on some level of migration to spur investment and development. America is probably the best example of what migrants could do. Britain has benefited from migration. Many Latin American, South American countries have benefited from migration. Many of us are descended from migrants. So why should I be against migration? I welcome migration, and I welcome the development of Guyana's population. Don't forget, we have one of the lowest populations per square kilometer in the world. 4 persons per square kilometer. Barbados is nearly 600 persons per square kilometer. So we need to encourage population. If people are going to prepare to come in here to farm, to produce coconut water, to produce furniture, I welcome them. But Guyanese must be first, and Guyanese must be educated and trained and given the tools to develop their own resources. My concern is with the Guyanese, ordinary Guyanese working people, and I would not like to see Guyanese jobs going to people without giving Guyanese that preference.
So, Mr. President, heading into March the 2nd general elections, there's an elephant in the room, the sugar industry. I think we were told the idea was to sell off or privatize the sugar industry, a couple of the estates, and some of the monies that you would have gotten to put it to modernize the other ones that are existing. That did not go so well. We don't have any investor at the moment. How do you intend to deal with the issue of sugar heading into the elections?
We have spent a lot of time in cabinet and government examining the problems. We have a white paper. We have more or less decided that we'll aim at about 150,000 tons of sugar, which is manageable from the remaining estates. We'll have 3 major estates, one in East Berbice, centered on Albion. As you know, I may very well have been the first president to go into Albion, and that was an experience. And I'm convinced that the workers and the factory workers and the managers are committed to making that industry survive. The second estate is in West Berbice, based on Blairmont, the West Berbice, and the third would be in West Demerara. So we are consolidating the sugar production. We're not destroying it or undermining it. We want an efficient sugar industry, and that is what we're aiming at. In terms of financing, yes, some of the lands have been earmarked for sale, and we had hoped to attract investors. There are some big issues in the sugar industry, and if you look at the history of the sugar industry for the last 200 years, it's all been consolidating. It is not an invention of the present administration. And there is a challenge now from other sweeteners. Health-conscious people are moving away from cane sugar, and we have to look at that the demand for cane sugar is not likely to rise, and it is a lesson for us in petroleum as well. The demand for petroleum will eventually flatten. It is not a forever industry. That's why I invented this decade of development, because within 10 years' time, you're going to see something happening to the oil figures. Many people are going to solar, hydro, wind, biomass. and the demand for petroleum wouldn't last forever. Coming back to sugar, yes, we need to ensure that the money is provided to finance those 3 mega estates in East Berbice, West Berbice, and West Demerara. And we have put in place an arrangement between the Sugar Corporation and NISL. That has not achieved the results, and we are in the business now, ironing out the relationship between those 2 organizations. NISL has responsibility for looking after state assets, and Sugar Corporation has the responsibility for producing sugar. And NISL is meant to sell off land to fund sugar production.
So the business community, the private sector has been asking or clamoring for a very long time for a level playing field when it comes to taxes, incentives, and everything. We are about to start collecting oil proceeds from next year. Oil production starts in December. Have you started putting thoughts as to how soon we could possibly have some incentives, a level playing field for local businesses?
We have put in place incentives for local businesses. We've reduced value-added tax, we've reduced corporation tax. So the business people who are complaining know very well that the Minister of Finance has been in touch with them over the last 4 years, and taxes have been cut over the years. And we will continue to incentivize the manufacturing community. Why not? We want to produce and export more. We would also like to incentivize agro-processing. Many Guyanese commodities could be better processed to add value. Or timber. I hate to see these huge pontoons carrying logs, down the Berbice River. If we were making furniture, if we were making prefabricated houses, as we attempted to do many years ago, we'd be much better off. The businessmen must turn their attention to innovation and to investment and to building the infrastructure. I'm not criticizing them, but businesses can't prosper on handouts. They have to take the risk and they have to invest. I'm not seeing that investment from business. A lot of foreigners are interested.
To be fair, sorry about that, Mr. President, but to be fair, they've said that the cost of electricity and the stability of the entire system. Today we're learning that there is no fuel, or the fuel is going to come till over the weekend, and so we have outages because of that. And they've been complaining that the high cost of electricity is a big burden on them. So maybe that's something that we need to look at, that it's not wanting to go into it, but it's that direction. David Granger, what kind of legacy does David Granger, the president, want to leave for Guyana, assuming that he gets another term?
My legacy is written on the faces of the people of this country. I am very happy that I have been accepted as their president, and I go to communities and they realize that we've been doing a good job. I think the legacy will be in the quality of life. There'll be more children in school. When I spoke to Queen's College students, I wasn't speaking to the alumni who went there decades ago. I was speaking to the children who are going to be running this country 10 or 20 years from now. That will be my legacy: an educated nation, a nation of greater equality, a nation in which there is greater employment for young people, a nation in which the environment is protected, clean air, clean water. That will be my legacy. An equal nation, an educated nation, a nation of full employment, and an environment that is healthy for future generations to come.
So we recently would have been celebrating a number of activities in agriculture. Where do you see agriculture in the entire scheme of things in the oil and gas economy?
You can't drink oil. You can't drink oil. You have to eat food. And agriculture has always been and will remain the mainstay of our economy. People are afraid that there will be a rush into petroleum, but in fact, petroleum does not employ a lot of people. Guyanese would be well advised to go into producing food. Personally, I have a friend who was in the Defense Force with me. He went into the hinterland to become a gold miner. So when I met up with him at a certain place, I said, I thought you were mining. He says, people have to eat every day. When the miners come out, they come here. And he's making much more with his hotel and restaurant than he would have made as a gold miner. Food is essential on a daily basis, and our thrust will be to continue food production. I would like to encourage more agro-business in which people process the foods and not allow the food to spoil. This has started to happen in some indigenous communities. There's no point trying to bring, tons and tons of raw cassava into the city. Make cassava bread, make kasri. No point trying to bring fresh guavas. Make guava jam, make guava jelly, and let us get processing, and we can use solar energy to electrify some of these communities. But we have to export more, we have to manufacture more, and I would hope that the business community, however it is defined, would put more investment, more infrastructure into manufacturing at the lowest level. We started a program, what we call RACE, Regional Agricultural and Commercial Exhibitions. And if you see what housewives, young people are producing with simple equipment, you would have great faith and great hope in the ability of this country to be a zone of major agricultural processing and exportation. And the Caribbean community is hungry for the foods that we could produce. Any fruit, any vegetable, any animal product, I am confident that we can market in the Eastern Caribbean. We have to learn more about packaging, we have to learn more about exploiting those markets in the Caribbean.
Do you seriously consider bringing a gas plant, maybe a natural gas plant, onto land here for cheap energy?
It is part of our policy of, of ensuring cheap and renewable energy. As you know, I went to India, and we are part of the International Solar Alliance. We are one of the original signatories. So gas is one thing, but it is a part of the plan. As you know, we have some difficulties or some challenges in the coastal zone because of the erosion that is taking place there and the rising sea levels. That has been the biggest challenge, where to land the gas. There will be gas, and that gas will power manufacturing in Guyana. Where to land is now the subject of investigation to make sure that we don't put it somewhere and then we discover that it suffers from sea level rising, and climate change. That's yes. The answer is yes, yes, yes. We will get gas.
2 days back, I had Minister Kaieteur sitting in that same chair there, and she was boasting about the many schools and interior locations where internet is now available. Where do you see within a year in terms of new players? Because there seems to be a stagnation in the liberalization part of it. Where do you see Guyana in the next year or two when it comes to the telecoms industry?
I do not want to prophesy about the outcome of negotiations. Minister Hughes knows very well that there are discussions taking place between her ministry and GT&T in particular. Digicel also has certain interests. I do not want to comment on the state of those negotiations, but in the meantime, it was a very innovative and powerful move on my part to create for the first time a Ministry of Public Telecommunications. And since she has been at that ministry, it has been able to introduce some phenomenal changes compared with what happened before. The changes are phenomenal. We started to issue laptops to teachers. Over 9,000 teachers have received laptops. She's putting these hubs in the country. We're trying to link all the primary schools so that, and secondary schools, even universities, so that persons could stay at Lethem or stay at Madhya, stay at Mabaruma, and get their university lessons online. So it's a very important development in terms of education, in terms of communication, in terms of the right of citizens to communicate with each other. Even in my previous campaign from 2011, I was speaking about the right to communication as an entitlement. Of course, it's not something that I put in the Constitution as yet. But going on to the information superhighway, we should not have to pay when you go onto university campus, when you go into the law courts, when you go into hospital. Every government institution, every school will be linked, and people must have access to the internet. I would even go so far as to say the ability to communicate is an entitlement. It is not a privilege that is extended to a few rich people with computers. It is an entitlement to every Guyanese citizen. You must be able to communicate with people all over the country. That will stimulate business, it will stimulate education, it will stimulate employment.
I know, Mr. President, that you've been paying very close attention to security of this country, domestic and at the borders. We've recently been receiving many complaints of the rise of small gangs around the place, and I know the police has been doing some good work with regards to that. Are you worried with the situation? Is the situation out of hand? Do we have it under control?
When you say worried, I don't like to use that expression. It is an area of interest, and I am a problem solver. If there's a problem, I solve the problem. I don't go home and worry about it. I say, what is the problem, and I look for solutions. I get my officers together, I get my ministers together, I get the technical people together and say, how do we solve this problem? I don't worry about it. There are solutions to hinterland crime. For example, we have created, for the first time in history again, 4 police divisions in what used to be Region 1, 7, 8, and 9, which used to be one division, F division. The whole hinterland was one division. It's the biggest part of Guyana. But by looking at it, I said there is a problem. It is not right to simply have a police deployment on the basis of population. Why not deploy the police on the basis of threat? If there's a threat from sindicatos in the Kuyuni Mazruni, if there's a threat of lawlessness, that's where the police must go. And we've created 4 police divisions to respond to those threats. Senior police officers are now in command of those divisions. So I solve problems. I don't worry about problems, I solve problems.
77 years old, you've battled cancer. Do you have the strength to do another term?
Who's 77? I'm 74.
Sorry. I think
You think
Ariana
about
told
Dr.
me that.
Jagan?
Yeah, Ariana told me that.
Oh.
How do you have the strength? It was a difficult past year for you. You've gotten some good news with regards to it's in remission now. Do you have the strength to do another term?
Of course. Yeah. It's a pity I only have 2 terms.
To do more?
Yeah, I can do more. As I pointed out, I have come to this position with experience, in 4 different fields. My recollection is that Dr. Jagan was older than me when he became president. Not that I compare my performance with him. Mrs. Janet Jagan was older than me. She was born in 1920 when she became president. She must have been 78 or 79. I am strong enough. I am supported by a good team. I have built a strong coalition. And I feel very strong now. And I'm going into the campaign. And all the reports from my hospital, from my doctors, suggest that I'll be strong enough not only for the campaign, but for the next 5 years.
So you are in control at the moment, and the coalition has done enough. Coming into 2020, it stands a very strong possibility. How many seats do you think you're going to win more?
That would be telling. We have done our calculations, and we are confident that we wouldn't be winning with a 1-seat majority. It would be a much larger majority. We are turning out more voters. We are mobilizing on the ground. And based on our record, we are convinced that we'll have a clear majority. as a coalition. We are going in as a coalition, we're better together, we're stronger together.
2 seats. 3 seats?
Hmm?
2 seats? 3 seats?
We're looking at 36 seats.
36 seats.
Yes.
So, Mr. President, in closing, I know that Ariana is looking at me very strongly. In closing, what do you say to the people of Guyana, the David Granger presidency coming into 2020 and the advent of oil?
Well, I can say to them that we have performed, we have been seen by you, we've come into your communities, we have, tried to resolve some of the problems you face in places like East Bank Babis. People have lights, they have a good road. They even stopped the president from going to Highbury 1 year, and they now have a good highway with lights. We have provided water, we have provided public services, we have increased the pensions of old folk, we've increased the salaries of low-wage earners, and we will continue to serve the people of Guyana. Those are the majority, and those are the people to whom we direct our best efforts. We don't ignore other sections of the community. If you look all round at our performance, you will see that we have done well, and I'm very convinced that the people of this country will give us a continuation or new term after March the 2nd, 2020.
So there you have it. His Excellency, the President of Guyana, David Granger. This is your host, Leonard Gildari, on The Political Show. Thank you for joining us.